Hi, my name is Katie Krummeck. I'm an educational designer based in Portland, Oregon, who works with school leaders, educators, district officials, and also educational professionals and nonprofit leaders from all over the United States and the globe to help them leverage design thinking to think differently about how we create experiences for students. And I also work with teachers to think differently about how we're educating students now and preparing them for the future and the world that they are going to step into. And I have, like many, had to pivot in the last few months to working with these groups of people online and have discovered Mural and found it to be an incredibly valuable tool and one that I believe could really support thinking about teaching and learning differently. So I wanted to share with you some of my kind of beliefs about why and where we need to go with K-12 education and then show you some examples of how I think Mural can help do that. So I'm going to just share my screen here. So I'm really thinking about designing student-centered learning experiences online in this context. But I think a lot of what I'm about to share, including the tools in Mural, are really relevant even in in-person experiences. So as I mentioned, my name's Katie. I really learned my expertise in design thinking on the job, apprenticing with amazing educational leaders while I was working at the K-12 lab at the Stanford D School a number of years ago. And now I'm working independently to work with teams around the globe. So obviously in my lifetime, we have seen many technological advances. Even in the last 10 years, it's hard to remember sometimes that things like smartphones and drones and electric vehicles haven't been around all that long. We've had these amazing technological advances, and yet we're facing incredible challenges as a species, challenges around drought and famine and pollution and climate change, the spread of misinformation, the opioid crisis in the United States, the divisiveness of our political climate at this moment, issues around the economy and manufacturing and what it means to be a part of a global economy. And as we know in the last, particularly in the last few months, or have been reminded, real social, racial injustice, that some of the citizens of the United States do not have the same access to freedom and safety and confidence that they will be okay. It's been exciting to see a lot of protests around that emerging. And now, obviously, we're also facing this silent enemy globally in the coronavirus. So, and all of the issues that have come up around that for people with incredible privilege and means, and those who are facing already inequities that have only been amplified. I know it's not the most uplifting way to start a talk, but I really want to foreground that we are facing incredible problems and that we are developing students who are about to head out into the world and are already from their own homes making real significant social change. And we owe it to them to build the skills and the mindsets in them so that they can inherit those problems confidently and start to make change. And I like to use this Albert Einstein quote: "We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them," to highlight that we all have to be thinking differently, and we particularly need to help students, the students we're teaching, think differently as they enter the world. So we need to be educating the young people of today to be prepared to inherit the problems that we've created, be ready to step into a space where they are working hard to make changes and improve the experience that they have. And I believe that that means that we need to be cultivating certain traits in students. So I want to share those. So I believe that we need to be developing students who are empowered, obviously, to make those changes, fix problems, and positively influence the world around them. We need to develop students who are self-reliant and resilient, who have the confidence to tackle tough problems with curiosity and optimism, who believe that they can go and find new pathways forward. We need to develop students who know how to collaborate with others, ask for help, and learn new skills in order to solve problems, and have an active process of tinkering and problem solving that supports their own metacognitive awareness and growth. So in other words, we need to help students to learn how they learn best, so that they can keep learning. If I think about my career, which is nearing 20 years at this point, my professional life, I've had to learn so many new skills, and having that belief and understanding of how I can continue to learn and grow has been critical, particularly in these last few moments or months when I had to learn new tools, new things like MURAL and ways to connect online, which were not ways that I typically worked before. I can talk about all that we need to accomplish and all we need to help develop in students, but the real question is, and we can identify what those things are, but the real question is, how do we actually do that, right? How do we accomplish those things? And especially, I think, for a lot of folks right now, thinking about how do we do this online when we're so much more disconnected from our students? So I like to use this quote from Paulo Freire, who wrote The Pedagogy of the Oppressed, to talk about kind of what are the goals of a teacher-student relationship and how can we accomplish some of these outcomes by really seeing students and teachers as partners. So I'm going to read the quote, which says, "Teachers and students, leadership and people, co-intent on reality, are both subjects, not only in the task of unveiling that reality and thereby coming to know it critically, but in the task of recreating that knowledge. As they attain this knowledge of reality through common reflection and action, they discover themselves as its permanent recreators." So again, how can we really inspire teachers and students to feel like they are co-creating, recreating knowledge around the system and really working together to discover themselves as recreators, particularly those students who we want to empower to feel that they can make changes. So I believe that in order to accomplish those goals, we need to be creating learning experiences that have certain traits. So I want to share those with you. So one is creating learning experiences that are open-ended, challenge-based, and relevant to the real world, that are process-oriented, student-driven, and ask students to create new knowledge and new ideas. That ask students to face open-ended, ambiguous problems and actively work to solve them. So really stepping into a space where we don't know the right answer. And that are interdisciplinary. So we know, and I think, again, the pandemic does a great job of demonstrating this, that the world's problems are not siloed into disciplines like math and history, but that actual problems in the real world are by nature interdisciplinary. That for us to fight this pandemic, we need to be obviously using science, biology and epidemiology, but we also need to be using things like communication skills and policy, and thinking about history and thinking about the pandemic of 1918. So there are many components to understanding and fighting a particular problem. And we need to be able to create learning experiences in school that mimic that process of using those multiple disciplines to understand and solve a problem. But again, how do we do that? So I wanted to share a couple of kind of educational theories that really support me, and then that's going to, in my process, and then that's going to transition us into the tools that I'm using, including MURAL. So one of them is this idea of constructivism. So the theory that recognizes that learners understanding and knowledge is based on their own experience. So instead of a student being a vessel that they get filled up with knowledge, they're really taking in information, making sense of it based on their own context, and then creating knowledge for themselves. And then there's this idea of Constructionism, which is a theory that says learners must construct mental models to understand the world around them. So it's not even that they're taking in knowledge and understanding that in their context, but they're actually building the schema around them to process that knowledge and encounter that knowledge in the first place. The zone of proximal development is this idea of the distance between what a learner can do without help on their own and what they can do with support of someone with more knowledge. So how do we as instructors or facilitators put students in that sweet spot of being able to really start to build their capacity and empower them, but also support them so that they don't feel frustrated or lost? And one of the primary supports for that is this idea of scaffolding. So using these instructional techniques to move students progressively towards stronger understanding and ultimately greater independence in the learning process. For me, in my work, most of the scaffolds that I leverage come from the design process. So using methods and tools of design to create those scaffolds that really allow students to explore a problem, generate solutions, make changes based on feedback, and advance an idea. So I really leverage those scaffolds, those tools, and I do that with MURAL, which I'm going to demonstrate in just a moment. So the last thing I want to talk about before I transition to the tools are just some of my own personal values and considerations when designing these learning experiences, particularly online. So I really believe in putting human connection first and building relationships and rapport first in order to really build trust with students so that I can turn it over to them to be in charge of their learning. Creating opportunities for purposeful collaborative work. So working on real problems that matter and doing that on collaborative teams. Empowering participants to drive their own learning and doing. So giving a little bit of context, creating a bunch of scaffolds, and then setting them off to do their own work. And then also leading with focus, humility, vulnerability, and fun. So being a model for students of how to step into this space and this way of being. The considerations I make are really thinking about the learning objectives and goals for the session. And by learning objectives, I don't mean content areas, but really, how do I want the student to be different at the end of the lesson? How do I want them to have a new understanding of who they are and what they're capable of? Creating these invitations and norms, so particularly in an online context, really inviting people to participate in a certain way with a certain level of engagement and giving expectations around that. Paying attention to the emotional and energetic arc. Learning, especially learning kind of at the edges of the zone of proximal development, is tiring. It's work. And so can I as a facilitator tend to that emotional and energetic arc? And then building technical capacity and comfortability. So I'm going to talk about that in a moment with MURAL. But how do I really build confidence in people using these tools so that the tools become really tools for them to advance their work and not kind of distractions or frustrations? And then finally, levers. Like, what are levers that I can pull to really design these learning experiences to be successful? So communicating before the session. MURAL has done an amazing job of creating these very bite-sized tutorials. So I curate those tutorials and I send them in advance to give students a chance to explore them. Communicating expectations during the session. So when I'm going to send a link, talking about what the link is going to do and where you're going to go, really over communicating what people can expect as they're learning. Using those tools for connecting, disseminating, sharing, and collaborating. And really for me, That has been primarily mural, and I'll show you some examples. And then utilizing physical space and ambiance. So not forgetting that even though we're working in a digital environment, we're living in a physical environment. And so how do we use our bodies, move around, use the physical space to create levels of energy and engagement? So the tools I primarily use are Zoom, and I like to use Zoom because I can really send participants out to breakout rooms to work with each other. So I can give a little bit of instruction and then have these mural boards with all of the scaffolding and the structure, and I can send the students out to really advance their project on their own with minimal support from me. They can always come back, obviously, if they have questions, and I bring them back to give them context. But this allows me to really set teams off to work independently. And then finally, mural. So leveraging mural to build that structure and infrastructure for learning, and then really allow students to leverage that to drive their own project. So I'm going to just share some of those tools that I have built. And I am going to, I'll keep my face up for a little while now so that you can see me. Minimize this window. So what I do when I start a learning experience like this is I really create a dashboard of learning. And you can see, and I'll zoom in a moment, but you can see that I've got mural tips here and some of those curated tutorials so people can always be referencing. I always put the teams and facilitators so that students know which teams they're on and who they're interfacing with. So we have those teams and facilitators. And then this, I made actually a kind of a demo, a mock-up of a design challenge for middle high school students to be designing solutions to staying safe at school during a pandemic. So again, working on a real problem that really they're facing and that they have unique insight into as students. So I also use this mural dashboard to kind of give those learning objectives and the overview of each session. And I also give space to reflect on what was working for them, what was not working for them, and what they learned during every session. So creating those moments for reflection to allow students to solidify their learning. And then finally, the kind of core of the mural is creating kind of these workshop spaces and resources for teams so that they can go in during a particular session and access their own team's mural boards that have all these scaffolds. And so again, for me, those scaffolds come in the form of design tools and processes. So some of those tools look like these, which you can click open and they create PDFs. And that helps support students to move through the process on their own. And I'm going to show you an example of that in a moment. The other thing I love about Mural is that I can link to videos and articles. So we would need to learn about the pandemic before we start the design process. I have a bunch of articles and videos about the design process here so students can explore and learn more there as well. And then the last thing I want to highlight on this dashboard is, like I mentioned before, problems are inherently interdisciplinary in the world. And so I wanted to call out and think about, if teachers from all over a student's schedule, their experience, could come into the same mural board and look at the work that they're doing and assess the skills in their different areas, we could naturally create more interdisciplinary learning experiences. And I think that that's a huge advantage of Mural because many people can be looking collaboratively at the same work, and it breaks down those silos between disciplines. So it was just brainstorming some of the skills and content area that might come up in these different disciplines that could be assessed through a design challenge around coming up with solutions to make schools safe during a pandemic. So the next thing I'm going to do is go over to an example of one of these team workspaces. So this is around brainstorming. So we have up here instructions and detailed rules and tips for how to conduct a brainstorm. I've created a space for a practice brainstorm, And then there are spaces to generate your own ideas based on problems that you framed from your previous design research. There's little different analogies to help students draw inspiration. And each segment has a time limit so that students can really manage their own work. And I would obviously also be giving them time warnings as they go as well. And then there's a process here of sorting ideas into particular categories. Hang on just a second. Sorting them into different categories for their ideas here. Oh, and then selecting ideas as a team. So using different criteria that I've established to give the students an opportunity to select as a group what they want to advance into prototyping and testing. So that's an example of these workspaces and the kinds of scaffolds that I can create, and then I can work through with them as they're going to help support them in their process. The other thing I want to share quickly is just the idea of building capacity in students with something like Mural. So I've developed this obstacle course where I would put teams into breakout rooms. There's instructions here. And then there's a bunch of challenges that each team needs to accomplish on their own that works on a particular skill in Mural. So this one is about moving Post-it notes. This one is about populating a Post-it note, bringing in a photo. Similar here. This would be making a team logo based on shapes. This one would be using icons. This one would be using the drawing tool. So they are working in breakout rooms collaboratively to move through these different challenges, and they're also building confidence and capacity in the tool of Mural. And then, of course, I also have a reflection component here where students are thinking about what are the most important things that they learned, what did they learn about working as a team, what worked and what didn't work, etc. And then the final thing is creating this introduction to design thinking, where again, I can put students in pairs, send them to breakout rooms, and they can work through a design challenge, designing for each other, in this case about the morning routine, and advancing their ideas through this process. And I would pull them back, give them a little bit of instruction, but they also have everything that they need right here to move through the process and really understand what the design process means. So I wanted to share those examples. And the last thing I'll do is just pull up the slide deck again and share how you all can connect with me if you want to do that. So you can reach me at that email address or on Twitter or LinkedIn, and I also have a website. But I appreciate you listening, and thanks so much. Take care.